aerospace and defense manufacturing,
machines and automation,
additive manufacturing,
smart manufacturing,
global manufacturing economy.
Welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, the podcast for manufacturing professionals, powered by SME. From the design screen to the shop floor to final assembly, we drive the conversation about making manufacturing smarter by connecting people who are passionate about manufacturing. Visit us at sme.org.
Hello, and welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, the podcast for manufacturing professionals. I'm your host, Steve Plum, Editor-in-Chief of SME Media. I'm joined by Laurie Harbour, President and CEO of the consulting firm Harbour Results, Inc., or HRI. She recently co-authored the new book, Tradition Meets Transformation, Leadership Strategies to Revitalize Manufacturing, with her business partner, Scott Walton. The book offers a prescriptive guide to help North American manufacturers regain their edge and keep pace with the evolving global landscape. So anyone involved in manufacturing, especially on the automotive side, is familiar with the Harbour name, as in the Harbour Report, which provides the benchmark for manufacturing productivity across automotive plants. She founded Harbour Results 15 years ago to help manufacturers transform their operations through financial and operational improvements. So thanks for joining us and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate you having me on.
So before we get started, could you tell us a little bit more about HRI and the impetus for writing the book?
Sure. Our company, Harbour Results, is a small consulting firm focused on small and mid-sized manufacturing. So somewhat process-focused. So we love stamping, die casting, plastics, tool and die, machining, heavy machining, forging, that type of stuff. So we're involved with a lot of manufacturing associations, and we work with them and their members to drive process improvement, help them develop strategic plans for the future and sales processes. But we're also doing a lot of benchmarking across all of those companies. So we're sort of the backbone of those associations, benchmarking, and that allows us to gather data from 600-700 companies a year on just their overall performance, both financially and operationally. And over the years, as Scott Walton is my business partner, we're on this company together, and as we have spent 15 years looking at these suppliers to all kinds of industries, by the way, not just automotive, but medical and aerospace and agriculture and just really any type of manufacturing, which is the great part about being involved with the associations, is you see different industries and gather market intel. We have watched, manufacturing age in this country and our leaders of manufacturing age, and we've watched sort of this new generation of young professionals come up the ranks out of college and university, and frankly, as we know, struggle with, do I want to be in manufacturing? Is it cool? Is it a good place to be? And, as manufacturing zealots, we're very passionate about, keeping this industry not only alive, but strong and healthy, competing against the rest of the world. And we realized in working with a lot of our clients that there are a lot of young professionals who are passionate about manufacturing, and we need to find a way to be able to get more of them in this industry. We need to find a way to bring the tradition of our experienced, soon to retire experts and connect them with these young, passionate, and a set of people that have a new toolkit than some of us old folks do, right? They learned more in school. They love data analytics. But we need the experience of that older generation. We can't lose that as manufacturing evolves. So our intent of the book was to try to help people understand, how do we take that experience, combine it with the next generation of experts, and really take manufacturing next level, or get us competitive again globally, so that we can save jobs and bring new jobs in and be more competitive around the world. So that was sort of the impetus of that, and sort of our goal of kind of giving back to the next generation and getting them excited about this space that we play in.
You mentioned that the industry is aging in a lot of ways, and the 20th century was kind of, the U.S. was at the forefront of manufacturing in a lot of ways, although competition was creeping in over the last 20 years at the end of the century. Kind of just to set the stage, where do you see the state of U.S. manufacturing today, and how did we get to that place?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I have all the answers of how we got there, but this country was founded on middle America and manufacturing, and that generation, like my father Jim Harbour's generation, right? I mean, he had come from an environment where you were told these were great jobs, go into this market, go into this place. And as we were born, this generation of sort of I'm an Xer and then moving into millennials, and myself included, I told my kids, you got to go to college, guys. It's the thing to do, right? So we kind of pushed everybody to college, and that put them into positions that were away from the skilled trade of manufacturing. And even myself, I learned very quickly that my son wasn't geared for college, and now he's a tool maker, and he's doing phenomenal. So, it's sort of that generational shift. And now we've got a bunch of young folks out there that are graduating from college, and some of them don't even have jobs, right? Because of the industries we're in, like some of these service, financial, and healthcare industries are all laying people off today. All the tech places, right? Laying people off. So, and it's kind of how we got there. At the same time, of course, China and other, Eastern areas of the world, had a lot of population and started a lot of manufacturing, and were able to start sort of attacking our industrial base. And as I sit here today, I have a lot of concern about our industrial base and the cost differences that exist in building, parts over there versus building parts here. The downside of, the cons of kind of what happens when it sits on a boat and gets here, and then, what work do we have to do with it here? And also, we've got a lot of geopolitical issues, a lot of global unrest that concern me as we go into the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now. What will happen now that we've sourced so much to other regions of the world based on cost or price? And, we have some kind of global unrest in the Pacific Ocean. What happens to our products and our services that come here? So it's a real concern of mine. And one of the missions and goals, I call it our why, sort of based on the Simon Sinek approach. Our why is about North American manufacturing every day. It's why we wake up. It's what we sort of bleed to do every day. And so we're trying to help companies be more effective and efficient so they can compete in the world out there. We have a lot of waste in our manufacturing that has come about over the years, and we need to be better in order to compete globally. So I'm bullish about manufacturing, and there's a lot of great investment going on. But of course, Mexico is a big portion of this continent's approach to lower cost. And, we have good skilled people here. We got to keep pushing forward to be better.
The book really lays a good foundation and gives a lot of great examples, a very good read, and I could recommend it, and takes a comprehensive approach and outlook for companies to assess their business. But I wanted to jump around a little bit and to the end, and then get into the more of the meat and potatoes of it. But the last chapter or two, you talk about leaders and what makes a good leader, and some of the characters and traits of leaders. And obviously, with your experience, you've dealt with a lot of high-level people over the years, and seen the good, the bad, and all that's in between. Can you elaborate a little bit on some of the things that you think make a good leader?
Yeah, absolutely. We've done a lot of case studies of those companies that, we have this assessment process that we do, and we gather all this performance data. And when I triangulate the assessment data to their financials and their throughput and efficiency, the common denominator of those top performers is that they have strong and edgy leaders. And in our definition of that, essentially what that describes is that these are people who are, in a positive way, questioning everything. In other words, guys, we've done that for 20 years. Why do we do it that way? Is there a different way to do it? And how can we attack this in a different way? And empowering and challenging the team to think differently. When I talk about that tradition or that experienced manufacturing person, when we go into plants, a lot of times we hear, yeah, no, we've tried that, or yeah, that just doesn't work anymore. And you ask what process they use for things, and they say, well, I just know what to do. I've been here for 20 years. And that's some of the roadblocks that allows us to not teach the younger generation very well. It's sort of what we call tribal knowledge. Those leaders who challenge that tribal knowledge and who give the tools to the people to affect change are significant. So the best example of this is a client of ours who owns a tool and die shop. And during COVID, what he did was, he said, hey, we're essential. We have to keep building tools, which means we have to be in the plant. But we need to figure out how to manage social distancing and people like design and engineering and HR. And he created a team, a cross-functional team, who sat down and he empowered them and gave them the tools to come up with a new plan and a new schedule to be able to manage the COVID impact, but also continue to get done what they needed to. And in fact, today, it's still in play. He's found ways for them, those who work at home, to be more effective and efficient and drive overall efficiency. And so that's just one simple example. There's plenty of others, but it's really about challenging the thinking to be different and empowering. And then the other big piece of it, in my mind, is the openness and willingness to take a risk on this new generation. This new generation comes to us with tools that they learned in university or in the School of Hard Knocks as skilled trade people. And they have ideas. And too often we look at people on the floor and say, well, we make the decisions up here and you don't really know how to make those choices. And a lot of our best leaders are, figuring out where can we turn things loose to this next generation to make us better. And the ones who've done it have used data and technology and implemented automation in ways they never thought that they could do. I mean, I frankly have 5 people that work for me that are under 30, and they make me look better every single day because of the data that they crunch, the analysis they develop, and their ideas and their thoughts. So empowering that next generation, challenging the things that are in place. You don't have to be the smartest guy in the room or gal in the room. What you need to do is create a team that allows you to effectively drive the business into a new direction. And so those are a couple of the key things. I mean, there's several other things we could talk about, but it's fundamentally about leadership. It starts in the corner office, right? And if we don't have that level of empowerment and openness to the rest of the team, we tend to see a lot of dictators and a lot of old school thinking that doesn't change the company.
You talk about the multi-generational mix in companies today, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. With the I think it was 60% or a little bit more than 60% were in the middle two categories, with not much, only I think 10 or 15% on the Gen Z side. How do you get them to not only just coexist, but collaborate and share the ideas and have the baby boomers and Gen X accept the fact that this next generation can bring new ideas to the table, and on the flip side, that let the younger people know that the older, more experienced ones do know what they're doing to some extent.
It's a huge challenge. There's no doubt, right? I mean, the first thing we've got to do is we've got to get them in the company. And it's a big deal because this next generation thinks that manufacturing is, what it was years ago: dirty, dark, dingy, not a lot of technology. A lot of these people remember, they're technology driven, right? They've had a phone since they were kids. So they want to see technology and cleanliness and those things. So I always tell people, step one, clean your plant up and make it a place that you're proud of, just like your home is. And then we can use that and market it to be able to get the next generation in the door. And then when we get them in the door, the other thing that one of the leaders that I work with did that I thought was just super impactful and has changed their business is when they hired one young person or one young woman or a Hispanic or, something that's a diversification, they didn't just hire one, they hired 3 or 4. So they kind of come in a pack mentality. And when they come in that pack, they have somebody to rely on, right? So it's not like they're there by themselves and a fish out of water, right? So now they're there. How do we engage them? Do we shove them in a corner and tell them that they don't get to learn or train? No. I mean, the best are putting them on cross-functional teams. They're giving them a voice. They're asking their opinion. They're asking them to take a series of data, analyze the data, and then tell us what it means. So they're starting them in sort of low risk areas and not, out making a decision today about a product launch or something, but they're teaching and coaching and training them. It costs us about $18,000 every time we bring a new person in and then they don't stay. So if we can get them to stay by training them and creating an environment where they, this younger generation, they want to contribute. I always tell my children who are 22 and 29, you guys want to change the world. And that's just how they run, right? They think they have all the answers. And so sometimes they come across a little more confident than they should be. But that's not necessarily a bad thing if we can get them and train them on the techniques and the processes, right? So I always tell people, grab your best, older, experienced group of people. And what I mean by best is not the crotchety old one that doesn't want to teach. You got to find the ones that want to give back and want to save manufacturing, and then pair them with that younger generation. Let the young people crunch the data and let the experienced one help them understand what it means and then create a problem-solving culture. So we have to find avenues. The worst thing we can do is find the person who is bitter and angry and needs to retire and tell them we got to train the next generation, because then that next generation is going to go, why do I want to be here? This guy's not a lot of fun.
But a good mentorship program, as well as maybe even a formal apprenticeships can go a long way, I would imagine.
For sure. Absolutely critical.
So going more towards the start of the book, one of your first examples of a company, I think it was an injection molding company, that you went in and did an analysis, and they had expanded too rapidly, got into some businesses that they may not have been as familiar with, and your recommendation was a complete overhaul, divesting some of those businesses and a change in leadership. But hopefully not all that is to that extent drastic, where you new existing leaders that have preconceived methods and thoughts can still adapt and change?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. I mean, that company was a very large automotive and medical supplier, and they had just grown so quickly that their structure had become a lot of plants that weren't full. And then, when that happens and volume softens a bit, things become challenging. They were over leveraged, and there was just a huge amount of challenges. And so with some consolidation and with some key people in key positions to, again, those leaders who could start to challenge everything. Sometimes we get stuck in that status quo. We can't even see outside of it to figure out how to fix it, right? So it's the old adage that we hire consultants, they come in and read our watch and tell us what the time is. Well, sometimes we're just not looking at the watch. And so we have to help, people in that vein. And when you do that, those companies can turn around as quickly as they might have gone the other way. And the outcome of that situation was substantial for the ownership of that company. So there's definitely, we see diamonds in their rough all the time in the facilities that have not been empowered to make an impact. And once you've got the right leader who turns them loose, you can find your most challenged person on the floor who you think would never change. And we've seen them do a complete 180 and become some of the most contributing factors in a company. But when you're not empowered and you're shut down, it's just sometimes you just say, forget it, I'm not going to contribute.
Yeah. So, the starting point was the assessment, and you kind of took a very broad approach to it. We really have to assess the entire operation, and you kind of broke it down into 4 quadrants, with the top performer being obviously the best and the goal. But there was, I forget how it was worded, the good but maybe not sustainable, and the ones that wanted to be good but didn't quite know how to be there. What's the mix right now? How many really are top performers, and what are the next steps to getting to that level?
It has been interesting since the pandemic, right? So in the pandemic, I would argue that in 2019, pre-pandemic, all manufacturing, automotive, appliance, every industry was starting to soften. We were predicting a minor recession as we went into 2021, not a 08, 09, but more like a 2001, where we had 11 years of expansion. So we started to see softening in the market. And then, of course, COVID hit, and then this huge amount of federal funding, both in Canada, Mexico, and in the U.S., came into these companies and frankly helped some companies that were probably not going to make it through a light recession, sort of buy themselves another year, another two between PPP and ERC funding that occurred, right? And so we were talking at that time that there were some very strong companies then who went into COVID. And what you saw in the pandemic was they took that downtime to be even better. And they right-sized the ship and said, yeah, we probably have a little more labor than we should. And they started attacking processes and systems because they had time. And it was such an unknown, pandemic, right? And then there was others that just took the money and did the same thing that they did. And frankly, some of those private owners of small companies who took all that federal funding and may not have used it the way it was intended to be used and might have, new boats and new cars and other things as a result of that. Well, now we're sitting here 3 years sort of post-COVID, if there is such a thing, and federal funding is gone. And we had a massive boom in 21 and 22 of durable goods because we were all at home and buying appliances, redoing houses. So demand for manufacturing big goods was high. As you know, cars were selling, inventories were drained, we had supply chain issues, right? It was just this really bumpy road of really high highs and really low lows. And now we sit here in an inflationary high interest market, a potential light recession this year, driven by unforeseen factors of the pandemic. And now federal funding gone, and some of those same companies that are still doing the same things they were before. So in our data of 600 or 700 shops, we saw a double impact. Those companies we would consider, we kind of call it unbankable. And what we mean by that is they have very high debt ratios, very highly leveraged on their balance sheet, and don't make enough money to cover their debt service. So that the bank looks at them and says, hey, I'm getting ready to pull out of that. So if you look at sort of a 3-column chart, you've got about 50% of that 600 or 700 companies that are solid. I call them in the green, very bankable, right? They make good money. They have very little debt, and they're doing well, even when volumes might be down. And then on the other end of that 3-panel chart, you've got, a growth, a doubling of troubled companies to about 1/3 of the population that is sort of unbankable. And then you've got this group in the middle, that 20% that's left, that is can be one way or another based on any given day. In other words, you could lose a program and go to the bad side. You could win a program or get some price increases and go to the good side. So they're kind of sitting on a fence. So it's unfortunate, but we are seeing more. We're seeing a lot of tools moving around and a lot of transfer work because big companies are pulling tools from troubled companies. So it's part of why I have a little bit of concern about the next 5 or 10 years in terms of overall health of the industry.
You bring up a couple of good points there. One is, how can companies prepare for the unforeseeable, such as COVID or economic crisis or a natural disaster? And also, you mentioned that the companies did have some time where they could do this massive assessment, the ones that did it right. But typically, they may not have that extra time, that cushion where they can do that. How long does the assessment process take? I imagine it varies depending on the size and complexity of the business, and how do you do that while you continue to operate the business?
Well, we talk in the book about our assessment process, which is, 2 or 3 days, depending on how big the company is and complexity, as you said. But I also say in the book that, as much as we would love to assess all these companies, it doesn't have to be hiring a third party. We have to think creatively. we could have a cross-functional team at our company. Like, God forbid we'd have sales assess the shop floor, right? But it can be done, right? So a cross-functional group in our company, a board of directors that we have that come in on the outside. All these guys that are small and medium-sized companies, they have peers, they have friends, they go to these association, events, and they have good friends that they see 3 or 4 times a year at these events, but maybe they don't compete. So maybe they could say, hey, would you come into my plant and give me your opinion, and vice versa. So it doesn't always have to mean hiring some big consulting firm. Our interest in what we wrote in the book is you have to be taking a fresh perspective of your business every 6 to 12 months. And it doesn't have to be a long, arduous process. It just means that we step back and we step out of the day-to-day of what we call working in the business and think about working on the business. Why do we do this way in costing and quoting? Why do we set up the job this way? What's our data telling us? What's the data telling us about our quality and our delivery? And more importantly, our profit per part. Did we quote it right? Are we running it right? Is it at standard cycle times, or is it better or worse, right? So we get so tied up in the day-to-day running of firefighting in the business, which, to be honest, firefighting in the last 3 years has just become the norm because nobody's forecasts are predictable from the larger customers, right? So we've gotten so caught up in the firefighting that we don't step back and go, why do we do it that way? And how is that yielding us good or bad performance? So companies can do it themselves if they can be open enough to that, right? But the reality is having a fresh perspective. And I will tell you, every time I go to book an assessment, someone says, oh, it's just not a good time. And I always say to them, is there ever going to be a good time? Because it doesn't matter. You should do it when you're healthy, and you should do it when you're not so healthy. Because if you're healthy, you want to go to the next level and ultimately drive flexibility. That's the key to any business. If I can be flexible, I can react to market demand without it hurting the performance of my business. In other words, I could, in 2021, when demand went up, durable good demand in our country went up 40%. The best reacted to that and found ways to meet higher demand. Those who weren't flexible, they even though demand was high, it killed them. They didn't make any money on higher demand, right? So flexibility in all aspects of the business is where the key to that is. So our assessment looks at it based on that. Like, how flexible are we in each area of the business, including finance and HR and sales and marketing. So we love to do it, but I also want people to think it doesn't have to be about hiring a consultant. It can be about, your peers.
It also introduced the improvement process wheel, which I believe was commercial strategy, tech roadmap, vision strategy, operation strategy, and talent strategy. We've talked a little bit, on the talent side, but can you take us through the wheel and what that means?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what you see fundamentally on the outside of the wheel is 2 fundamental things. One, we just discussed: reassess your business on a regular basis, even if you do it yourself. But use the data in your business. Everybody has these expensive ERP systems. What does the data tell us? And, attack those, dirty dozen parts that don't make you any money. Or more importantly, which ones do I really make a lot of money on, and why? Like, what do I do so good, and how do I transfer that experience to other areas of the business? And then as you get into the inside of the wheel, the reason we did it as a wheel is because every company sits in a different place, some better than others. You may enter the wheel in a different place than someone else. So if I'm strong and I'm stable, then maybe I'm revisiting my strategy and I'm walking through all of the strategies of each of those areas. If I'm in trouble, I'm not going to recommend we sit down and create a strategic plan. If we're in trouble, we're going to attack the data and we're going into operations to cut costs and figure out how to fix it, right? So that's why it's designed as a wheel. But fundamentally, every company needs to step back and create a solid strategy. What are my core competencies? What's my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? Why me? Why my business? What differentiates me over someone else? And develop that 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, look forward in your business. Without that, we can't tell people what to sell. We can't tell operations what to focus on. It's critically important, and it doesn't have to be over-engineered. A couple days of really getting aligned on our strategy is important. And then, of course, you need a commercial strategy. Our biggest request this past year for consulting has been on what we call sales process. Owners come to me and say, I don't even know what my sales guy is doing. He's out every day, but I don't know who he's selling to, and I don't have any business. So developing leading metrics, not lagging metrics. A lot of salespeople are measured on revenue only. We need to measure them on leading indicators. We need a sales plan that's tied to our strategy, the market intelligence that tells us what the market will bear on pricing, and just that whole aspect of the commercial strategy. And then, of course, operationally, we have to work on operational excellence every day. And that involves sales, and that involves the leadership team to say, we call them 3-panel charts. It's essentially lessons learned after we launch a project, or how's it running in the first week or month? How's it running 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now? You'd be surprised at what changes in parameters and in their bill of materials or the standards that drive, inefficiency. So being able to attack operations on a again, don't over-engineer it. It's industrial engineering 101. And then the last two pieces, of course, are talent strategy and technology. And they're in some cases linked, right? In that if we can't get labor to go into manufacturing, what level of technology and automation do we need to use? I mean, I truly believe automation and technology is the future. And I think if we do bring in the next generation effectively into our business, they'll help us introduce more technology and more automation. That technology could be process technology. In other words, how do we process it more efficiently? It could be software. It could be automation. And automation doesn't mean implement the same thing every single press you got in the business. What automation's right for me, and how does it drive the most efficiency on my troubled parts, right? And then tying that to the talent strategy. A lot of companies today are not, there's this old paradigm of direct labor, hourly people who touch the part, and then indirect labor, hourly people that move parts and material handle, and they don't touch the part per se, and then salary. A lot of the best companies are eliminating that paradigm, and they're going out and hiring more skilled, what we would typically maybe consider an industrial engineer or an indirect labor person, and hiring fewer of them to be able to wear multiple hats across the plant, run the press, change the die, problem solve it, pull it all the way through quality, and so on and so on. So, and they're paying more, but they're getting more value, right? So being able to create a talent strategy, I always tease my manufacturing friends that we view human resource managers as administrative, typically females. And we need to change that paradigm, that we need to hire a skilled strategist in HR. They need to sit at the executive table next to everybody there. In my opinion, they're the second most important person in the plant next to the operations manager. And we now build a talent strategy that drives our business. And we have to tie it to marketing. We got to market our business, show people it is cool. There's a lot of plants out there with great technology, very clean, very bright, very good places to work. But we don't view marketing in a role in HR. We don't view any of that, either way, right? So we have to use marketing for more than just sales. So that's kind of the fundamental key highlights of the wheel that we've put out.
I wanted to touch on the technology a little bit more, but first going back to what you were talking about, leading indicators, and some companies may be focused just solely on profitability, or what are some of the indicators that they may not be taking into account that they should be?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, a lot of our manufacturing, small and medium-sized clients, right, they have a small marketing type of budget or sales budget. And so a lot of times those salespeople have been doing it for years. They just, go on the road, they visit the customers that they know, and they're ultimately trying to get quotes, right? And then they get measured on growth and revenue. But salespeople don't love this, so it may not work for everybody, but in a strategy that we build with a sales plan next to it, if that, let's say, for example, we said, look, we want to grow by 20% and I want 5 new clients, right? So what I want to measure about 5 new customers in my business is I want to measure how many meetings did I have with new customers? Not just, hey, I went and saw Bob, he's our customer for 20 years, but what new customers are in my strategy plan that I want to touch, and what meetings did I get to do that? So, I don't want to get as rudimentary as, how many people did you call today? Because, that can drive the wrong behavior too. But honing in on the metrics of, hey, we want to be in medical. Okay, great. How many meetings did we have with new medical customers, right? What events are we going to? How are we going to those events? Are we walking a trade show, or are we having a booth in those events? How did our marketing impact? So one of the things I tell people about marketing is, if I'm a high-tech medical molder, for example, become a thought leader in social media. Do podcasts like this with thought leadership. Not there to say, hey, here's how great my business is, but hey, we did some R&D and we have mastered this thing, and this is what this engineered technology means and what effect it's going to have on the medical industry and on patients that have these parts put in their body, right? That kind of thing. So use social media as less of a sales tool and more of a thought leadership tool. Many people don't have a new website. They don't use social media. I have people today who still tell me, Laurie, you don't sell stuff from social media. I get it. But I'm trying to get my brand out there, and I'm trying to become a thought leader that differentiates me from someone else. So measuring hits to your website, hits to your social media, your impressions, your social media, and those types of things are what gets you ultimately to sales. Like, I still have to measure sales and revenue at the top line. But at the end of the day, if I'm doing all of those things, I should see the top line go up as the lagging indicator.
And on the tech side, as you mentioned, that is changing rapidly, becoming more sophisticated, more analytical, everything from automation to digital twins and just more sophisticated. And as we move more towards Industry 4.0, data is big, and I know you touched about that in the book as well. How can companies best use this influx of data without being too overwhelmed or falling off the data cliff?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, a lot of people do get into what I call analysis paralysis, right? And then they can't make decisions in that way. And now the flip side of that is, a lot of times we go to companies, we start to look at data analytics, and the people around the management team become so defensive and say, well, no, there was a special case there, and, that data is not right. And they put us in analysis paralysis because they're questioning every element of the data. And we always tell people, it's kind of like back in the day when my father and I did the Harbour report. We measured efficiency of vehicle assembly plants, right? And we would get people in the domestic GM, Ford, and Chrysler side who would say, oh, you can't compare me to Toyota's plant in Georgetown because I have this extra UAW type of labor doing these things, and they don't have that. And I remember distinctly my father saying, you are 45 hours per vehicle, and they are 18. When it's 18 to 20, we can talk about that 100 extra people you have on staff and do an apples to apples comparison. But right now, the gap's so big, just go work on it, right? And so we try to tell people today, we can challenge the data to a certain point, and then at some point we got to take it and we got to go make steps to drive improvement. And people say, yeah, but I've heard of the data right, that how am I going to do this? And we always say, listen, it's like baseball, guys. You get up to the plate 4 times, you hit 2 home runs, you're batting 500. You're in the Hall of Fame. We have to try some stuff. As long as it's in a low risk environment, what is the data pointing to? The preponderance of the data says we have a problem with, quality on this particular part. Maybe you can question the data, but maybe we should just go try to problem solve it and do the 5 whys and figure out what's wrong. So speed and we talk about this in the back end of the book too. Speed and velocity in decision-making are back to that edgy leader. Somebody who can say, look, I'm 80% directionally correct. Let's go do this. And you know what? If we make a mistake, we're going to adjust. We talk about the plan, do, check, act, or plan, do, check, adjust. A lot of people do plan, do, stop, and they don't check and they don't adjust. And we need to make decisions quickly to compete in a global environment. And when we mess up, we need to fix it quickly and make a different decision and continue to plow forward. That's what the best are doing. And that's where that leadership in the center of that wheel really drives it. If the center's broken, it doesn't stick together, right?
Yeah. So a lot of good advice. Thanks for sharing everything, and encourage people to go out and read the book. Overall, what's your feeling? Are you optimistic about the future?
I am optimistic about the future. I mean, there are definitely some things that concern me geopolitically and our just ability to be competitive on cost and wage rates. I am, the wake up every day bleeding manufacturing, and I've been in Washington pushing the agenda of manufacturing and why we need to buy here and what the benefits are long term. But we have a lot of really great stuff coming in this decade of manufacturing, and a lot of new vehicles, a lot of new appliances, and new things across the board, new products. And there's some really good companies. And it's not always bad to see some of those that are not the best in the world either consolidate or merge in, because it helps to sort of clean up the market and drive the best performance overall. But I'm positive about where things are going, and I'm excited about what the next 10 to 20 years looks like. But we do need to be diligent. We've got to do our job as manufacturers to improve our business. And we although I'm fighting with the government about it, we can't rely on them to solve our problems. We got to teach, coach, and train. And if we don't bring the next generation into this exciting space, it will be challenging in 20 years. And because the boomers and the Xers, we're going to be retired, right? So I'm very optimistic, and I see a lot of positive movement in lots of areas, and I'm going to keep pushing it forward because I want to see this just thrive and move forward for the next generation and beyond.
Oh, good one. That's I think a good place to end. Thanks again for your time. But if listeners want to learn more about Harbour results, or order a copy of Tradition Meets Transformation, where should they go?
Yeah, the book itself is available right on Amazon.com. So you can buy it there on Amazon. You can also reach out to me directly. Our website for Harbour Results is harborresults.com. So you can learn more about our company there. And then we also have a website, leadersmfg.com. And that's where we have our book. And you can look at public speaking. We come in and help companies directly with their business. You can find out more about us there as well.
Well, thanks again. It's been enjoyable and very, very insightful. And to learn more about the latest manufacturing trends and to hear more podcasts, visit us at sme.org.